afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 4 of our Parent Empowerment series. In sessions 1, 2, and 3, we've been walking you through the different decision points of your child's school years, shifting from helping to empowering, navigating subject choices, and considering the post-school pathways. Today, we take the next step, and that's focusing on how to support your young adults as they enter the workforce. This is about how we as parents can take on a supportive and an advisory role, staying close enough to guide them, but not so close that we take over. This phase is exciting, but it can also bring uncertainty, both for them and for us. And as much as it might feel like our very little time has passed since they were our children at school, we need to recognize that something significant has shifted. They are no longer children. They are now young adults that are stepping into their own lives. And that calls for a very, very different kind of relationship with them. Our roles is no longer to take the decision or to direct their path, but to engage with them in an adult-to-adult way. This means asking rather than telling, or listening before advising, and creating space for them to think aloud and to take ownership of their choices. It's a real mind shift change for us as parents, but it's one that will shape how we show up for them during this phase and how confident they feel stepping into it. Sometimes it also means allowing them to take a few wrong turns, because we know through our own experiences that success isn't a perfectly laid out plan. It is a full, real life made up of mountaintops and valleys, and lessons learned and wisdom gained along the way. Our task as parents is to stand beside them as they grow, to guide them where they need it, but also to step back so that they can take ownership of their journeys. I'm joined here again today by my colleagues Jo and Pippa. You've met them in the earlier sessions, and I'm again so grateful for their wisdom and voices in this conversation. Our format today will be slightly different. We plan to spend the first 40 minutes or so in discussion amongst ourselves on the topic at hand. And then we want to shift and use the last 20 minutes to share some practical models or reflection prompts that can help you prepare yourselves to show up well for your children during the season. So let's get started. In the first part, we thought it necessary to start by looking at the global context. What does the world look like that these young adults are entering into? And what does their future look like? Pippa, do you mind starting for us?
Yeah, of course. So I suppose I just want to start off by saying the real obvious, which is that the world that young adults are stepping into now is not at all the same world that you might have stepped into when you began your careers. And for many of us, for many of the parents, there was a sense of stability, right? Like that was it. You finished school, you studied, maybe depending on what you studied, you might have specialized, you found a profession, and then like if you were lucky, you stayed in that same organization for many, many, many years. And success was really defined by how secure and established you became, like how much stability you experienced. And the reality is that is not the case anymore at all. Stability has really shifted into a sense of uncertainty. You might have heard that workplaces are now being referred to as VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But now there's actually even a new acronym which stands for BARNI. So it stands for brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. And I mean, even if we just listen to those words out loud and think about like what that means for the environment that they're entering into. And it might sound really academic, but in practice, it really means that our young adults are not walking into clear career paths or career ladders at all. They are stepping into an environment where the ground is shifting all the time and the rules are constantly changing. And if we think about it in a South African context too, right, if say kind of a decade ago, right, if you wanted your child to be for life or set up for success, have pushed or encouraged them into a career like law or accounting or medicine. And those jobs are absolutely important. They're very well respected, but they are no longer guarantees. And I think that's an important thing that we've just got to like sit with, right? Instead, what's proving to be more predicted in the years to come is the roles of trades, right? Things like plumbing and electrical work and other skilled vocations. And many of those roles might have been roles that we didn't consider as highly sought out roles or top tier. And even just taking a moment to think about that should really make us pause, right? And perhaps ask ourselves, like, are we as parents holding on to an outdated definition or idea of success? So that is like the one thing I think we really just need to acknowledge. The other one is also there's this pace of change that is absolutely relentless. Like whether it's, you know, global warming, technology, climate pressure, like shifting, you know, demographics, everything is changing all the time at an incredible speed that is, I think, for many of us, incredibly overwhelming. And jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago, things like, you know, AI and renewable energy and so many of the digital professions are suddenly everywhere. And careers that we thought were rock solid, that were the go-to, are either completely changing or they're disappearing. And so right now, what really matters is that we know that it's not about kind of memorizing facts. If we think about like many of those careers that were based on that. It's not about following a predictable track. And if we think about there's a wonderful report that comes out, which is known as the Future of Jobs report, and it highlights that, you know, the most in-demand jobs for 2030, or rather, sorry, the skills for 2030 are things like, you know, analytical thinking, creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, lifelong learning, curiosity, and then, of course, technological literacy. And so I think it's important to just say that, like, success is no longer about one perfect job. It's really about whether young adults can keep adapting, learning, and keep moving when the ground beneath them is always shifting. It's not steady or stable at all. And so careers today really are not linear. Most, you know, young people won't just have many jobs. They'll have many different occupations across their lifetime. And so I think we need to think about it as not a career ladder anymore, but a jungle gym, right? It's up and down and changing all the time with lots of twists and turns. And that is not failure at all. It's actually just the reality of how modern careers work. And so I think the last thing I wanted to say is I think as parents, right, it's really about reflecting on, are we preparing our children for our world of work or for theirs? And so we've got to be really conscious of that, like, definition of success that we might have held on to, and what is right and what is the way things should be. And when we do that, we risk setting them up and setting ourselves up for a lot of frustration, that have to, you know, really let go of certainty and embrace flexibility and adaptability and resilience, really, as the new measures of what it means to be successful and thriving in today's day and age.
Wow, thank you, Pippa. I think there's a lot, and just listening to it, I think those words of brittle and just feels like all over the place and not stable is scary. And Jo, I know this is something you're navigating as a parent of boys that are entering the world of work at the moment. Is there something that you want to add for us to this?
Yeah, I think that the important factor is the fact that we should not force our children to take one job. It is what the opportunities that is there, take them. And the important factor is that we learn. The focus of younger people today is so much different than what it was when we were entering the job market. And I think we need to be patient with that, because we would have taken any job if we got that job. But they are very focused, and we should allow them to be that way, but also facilitate the process to get them to a point where they need to be. But I think open-mindedness and flexibility is the two key words.
And as you were talking, Pippa, and I think it's really, Pippa and Jo, I think it's really important for me to connect with the fact that their future is different than ours. And suddenly I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a youngster the other day that said their parents were talking about this thing about pension. Could I please explain that to her? And that dawned on me that, yes, our parents let us make decisions based on where you're going to get that pension fund that's going to carry through. And that doesn't even exist anymore. Well, in most instances. And it just, I think it shows that the values that we prioritized and where we came from when we made our career decisions, or we were guided to make our first career decisions into, and what is relevant today are fundamentally different. And that is hard to navigate because we can't understand theirs and they can't understand ours, right? Okay, so now with that, it's almost feeling the anxiety in the pit of my stomach. Let's talk towards, okay, now give us hope. What does this practically mean on a day-to-day realities for our young adults? How do they start preparing for that? And how do we show up in terms of leading them or supporting them through these decisions?
Yeah, Rentia, it is quite daunting, and you almost get that knot in the stomach when you know your child has to go into the working environment and find a job, and where and how. But there's a few things that Pippa has mentioned that I just need to re-emphasize as we go through the practical applications of it. The first is it's a transition. You might start with one position and then move into another, or your child will start with a position. We sometimes get the idea of you need to stay at one company for decades, like it was in our time. And yes, there are still companies where you start with a big corporate company and you move within the company, or you move within the industry between companies, which is also great, but that is not the norm anymore. And I almost want to say it's not flexibility, it's adaptability. I always joke and I say, but the cheese has moved. And I know we know the book that came out, Who Moved My Cheese? But the cheese has moved, and we need to be adaptable and not necessarily flexible. It is a necessity. If we don't adapt, we're not going to survive. And as we know, kids or young adults are more adaptable than usually what we are. So we need to work on that principle. And as you mentioned earlier, Rentia, my eldest is already working, which was a blessing, but how he got that position. But the younger one is very focused, and he's very determined of what he wants to do. And we almost, you need to find a job, build your network, and we'll get to that a little later on. But it is almost as if we in that be adaptable, look at things a little differently. We need to be in not what is the position or the title that my child is going to have, but what is he going to learn, and how is he going to transfer that knowledge and adapt or apply rather that knowledge in practice. How do they keep learning? That is also one of the aspects that we need to take into consideration as parents, is where is there opportunity for our child to learn continuously? If we don't learn continuously, we're going to be left behind, not just as children or our children, but as parents as well. So be open to your child that is looking at things in a different way. The one thing I just want to mention with the adaptability and the change is the different type of positions that youngsters now apply to. The first is project-based careers. So they will work on 4 or 5 projects at a time. They will either work from home or they will go in for a consultation session at the company. So it's almost like a consultant, but they work on 4 or 5 projects at a time. And that is fine. It's that stability of you need to have a title, you need to have the parking spot, you need to have an office, you need to have your laptop and the pension and the medical aid. And if your child is more inclined to that, then great. But if they don't, I just want to put parents at ease to say, don't panic. There's different ways of earning an income. The other type of roles that is becoming more and more, and the people from Cape Town will know this better than us here in Gauteng, is that digital nomads is more and more where you will see they will rent a place for 2-3 months, work from there, and then they will pack up and go. I know the one story of a youngster that went into an interview at a bank in South Africa, and the interviewing panel was so excited with the talent that they're having in front of them, and suddenly they tried to explain what is the career progression and what titles he can earn and how long he can work in the company and so on. And he stopped them in the middle and he says, let's just be clear, I will be here for 3 years and then I will leave. And they were all shocked because how can he already in his interview say, I'm only going to work here for 3 years? But that is the norm. It was frowned upon in years or many years ago when I was still in recruitment, where you went into a role and you left in 2-3 years. You had to stay at a company for a minimum of 5 years before you even thought of applying to another company. So these days, it's almost frowned upon if you don't, because it is about growing, it's about learning, it's about that adaptability into the new companies. And it is about you need to, as parents, if we maybe just come back to the parents, you need to adjust your expectations. And we need to make sure that you learn with your child on what is the new environment. There is the self-perception theory, where we learn who we are by watching how we do things or how we perform in certain things. So it's almost, if you need to allow them, and it's very difficult, and I'm struggling with it at the moment, where you need to make sure that you let your child go. They need to learn, they need to experience things. We want to protect them, and we're not always able to do that. And the one other thing that I just want to mention is your child is young. They can make mistakes. They can recover from a wrong career decision. And if they do, it's not the end of the world. It's how they recover from it and how you support them. Never blame. Don't go in, yeah, but I told you this would happen. Allow them to make that mistakes. They are young enough to recover, and be patient with them. It's very difficult. I know you sometimes want to say, let me do it for you. I'll explain to you how you should do it. And that is a very dangerous path to follow, because immediately they get their backs up and they block you out from their journey. And it's actually a great opportunity for you as a parent to start this journey with them, and have that relationship with your adult child so that they can, trust you in that journey with them. The other aspects that is very critical is to say they need to build their network. And networking is one of the key skills these days. I always joke and I say, it's not who you are, it's who you know. And but it is important to have that network, build a network through your career. At one point, I mean, nowadays, in me as a consultant, I still meet up with people that I worked with 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And now I'm giving away my age, but that building of a network is very critical. So for me, it's I've said a lot. For me, I think the critical part is to have that relationship with your adult child, to give yourself that platform in order to walk this journey with them, and that they have that trust in you to support them and not criticize them.
Thank you, Jo.
And as an extension of what Jo's been sharing, if we think about the importance of that relationship and trust in those conversations, I think one of the practical things that we certainly want to allow parents to really reflect on is thinking about the language and the phrases and the words that we use and don't use in those conversations that can really make or break that trust, and whether your child will open up or not. And so I want to share a couple of phrases and questions that maybe you can kind of bank for your own toolbox if you ever need them. So, for example, if your child is feeling like really uncertain about where to start, instead of saying something like, oh, you just need to make a plan, right? Maybe it could be something like, you don't need to have it figured out right now, and you don't need to have it all figured out, but what might be a helpful first step? Or what do you think you could try first, right? Maybe your child is in an internship or an entry-level position and they're feeling like really demotivated by it, or they feel like it's beneath them, like they can't see the connection between this role and where they want to be. And again, instead of saying like, this is just the way that it works, like kind of get on with it type of thing, this is how the world works, saying something like, your first job doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to give you something useful for your next step, right? What do you think this role can help you build? Or what are you learning from this role? And maybe they start talking about a change, maybe they get an idea or wanting to do something different that you're like panicking about and think, oh my golly, this is just ridiculous. It's about asking, what is drawing you to this change, or what is drawing you to make this change, and what are you excited about, or what are you hesitant about? And then, of course, if something bad happens, bad inverted commas, right? Like maybe they do make a mistake, the promotion that they were hoping to get doesn't come through, or they realize they've chosen the, again, quote unquote, wrong job. Instead of rushing in to give advice and kind of tell what to do, maybe it is about saying, this is a setback and it's okay, but it's a stepping stone. Where do you think it can take you next? And again, what did you learn about yourself in this experience? What can you take away from this experience? And so I hope that just kind of listening to some of the phrases and the language, and you'll notice that a lot of them are questions, that you will be reminded of the fact that they're really a powerful way to keep the conversation open, firstly, and very importantly, but also, again, targeted towards that kind of adult to adult relationship and also future focused. And it's a message that I trust you to figure this out, and I'm with you along the way, and I will support you while you do. And I think on that note, this is also really where parents need to manage their own generational, right, perspectives, because often we will bring our own fear and anxiety because we want security for our children, because that was what is important to us, right? But this generation is coming in with something completely different, right? They're coming in with a lot of inspiration and creativity and this big focus on meaning and purpose. And yes, sometimes they do come in with a lot of being naive and naivety as well. I won't take that away from that too sometimes, but really the there's a sweet spot, right? And that sweet spot's in the middle, right? Where we can support their inspiration while offering a grounded perspective. And so it's really just that sense of openness, questions, and facilitating a conversation, not dictating answers.
Sure, thank you both. There's so much in what you've shared, and that is really the reality that our young adults are stepping into. And I guess then once we've focused on them, there's a question for me also: how do we equip ourselves to thrive in this? And just as and importantly, what is our role as parents to help them in this? And I know both of you have spoken to that. As I mentioned right in the start of our session, this phase calls us to quite a radical shift in mindset, but also in our own behavior as a parent. And I love the practical advice and tips that you've given. To help us step into that, I want to suggest that we perhaps shift the roles a little bit and invite us to do a bit of a reflection exercise, specifically one that takes us back to when we were in the child seat, and to think about how in our pasts our parents have shown up for us during a time where we needed to make a critical career decision, and what were the moves they made, whether that was ones that didn't feel helpful for us at the time or ones that did. Because I think as a parent, it's useful to remember that we too were there, and that our parents are there as examples that we can either build on or learn from. So I want to suggest that we perhaps each take a turn and just share one of our examples that came to mind for us. And as you hear us talk through our examples, I want to invite you, whether you're here today or whether you're listening to the recording, to perhaps also pause and do that same reflection for yourself. And if you are willing or brave enough to share in the comments, either here or the YouTube video, that would be a lovely contribution to this. So, Jo, Pippa, I don't know which one of you want to start with sharing your reflection.
Yeah, for me, it's actually funny. It was about a week ago. I was looking for a document and I came upon a fax. So we as parents will know what a fax is, and it was a letter that my dad wrote me and faxed me, and that was well before we had emails. So I could still make out some of the writing, but it started fading. But the situation was, it was my first full-time position that I had. It was my own place. I was now a young adult, established young adult. My own work that I found, my own place that I found, and I was the bee's knees. And things started not working out. I struggled to adapt. I was not assertive enough at that point in time in my career, and it became a problem for me. And there was an opportunity for me to either move within the company to a more junior role, or I had to leave the company. That phrase of you're either on the bus or you're off the bus was given to me. After I read his letter, it was really just advice. It wasn't like, no, you can't resign because that is the wrong decision. It was really, even when I read it now, it is still good advice that my dad gave me at that point in time. And as he's a very structured individual, it was point by point by point. But it was so encouraging at that point in time, and it just made me calm and made me to be aware that even what decision I made, my parents would support me. I then moved into a junior role and then worked myself back into the role that I was appointed in, which then again helped my self-confidence. So for me, that was really a good example for me, how parents could support your adult child instead of telling or blaming.
I think, I mean, I probably have lots of stories, but the one that's just sitting with me at the moment, and I think it's also just applicable to my context now, is both of my parents are self-employed. So I witnessed the self-employment life growing up. And one of the things that my mum was always, for lack of a better phrase, I want to say like drilling into me in terms of really, really, really encouraged, was this idea as, you know, as a woman, you can be a mom and a working woman, and you don't have to sacrifice the one for the other. And for her, she saw, you know, self-employment as the way to do that. And my mom is in a similar-ish field to me. And so I grew up seeing what it means to be self-employed. And a lot of the time, while that message was reinforced so often, and I certainly vision for myself long term, I was very confronted with the fact that like self-employment was really hard, and it was like being married to your job as much as you were married to your spouse. And so as I eventually, totally unplanned, became self-employed too, I was really confronted with like a lot of the lessons that I'd been taught about what it means to be self-employed. You should be self-employed, but also a lot of the cynicism, the negativity that often came from my dad, and the worry about being self-employed, and often like the really hard parts of what it means to be self-employed I was often confronted with all of those. And so as I have embarked on my self-employment journey, I've really had to grapple with, what do I believe? Like, I've seen my parents live a certain life being self-employed. I hear all the stories. And yes, I've also faced a lot of the cynicism in terms of, I can see where my parents are coming from with the hard parts of being self-employed. But I've had to really filter some of the negativity or some of the lessons through my own lens, to go, what is working for me and what doesn't. And that does mean that there have been times where I either, you know, don't share as much, or I'm selective about what I share, because I have to filter it essentially to make sure that it really does serve me. And so I also hope that through the process of me filtering and making sense, and also choosing my own way and what I am going to take from them that they've done really well, and what I think they made as mistakes and what I want to change and do differently, I'm also hoping that, particularly in my mom's case, because our work is more similar, that like she's been able to learn from me around how maybe there are alternative ways of doing things, and like open up her eyes to different ways of working, perhaps making what felt like, you know, self-employment being this just exhausting, constantly overworking kind of path, to something that can actually be really fulfilling. And so it's something that I know that I'm going to continue. Employment is not linear by any stretch of the imagination, but I've had to grapple with both the positive and the challenge associated with having parents being self-employed, and then now me following in their footsteps, which I kind of didn't expect.
Yes, I've seen a big part of that journey with you, and I think now, if I'm listening through it through the eyes of a parent, I'm going, oh, I don't want my child to filter, and it's going to happen, right? And so I think my own story is absolutely relatable to. I think there's themes on for my story in both of what you've shared. So on two instances in my life, I've deliberately made the decision to exclude my parents from speaking into my decision. And so the first one came in my second job. My first job was quite short-lived. That's where I met Jo, by the way, many years ago. And that just came to an end due to some restructurings. And I found an amazing job at an amazing company where, for my parents, who really, really valued stability in their generation, thought this was it. This was now going to be the job for life. And 6 months into that employment, they restructured, and we were going through a retrenchment process. And I saw an opportunity to create a to I saw an opportunity to move down to Cape Town, and I wanted to play the cards in a certain way that would see me doing that. And I remember the day before I went into that consultation meeting where I was going to table my idea, I had a telephone conversation with my father, and he said to me, "Don't do it. Don't play, just take what you can and hold on to, and just play it safe." And I wasn't going to play it safe. And I remember crying as I put down the phone, because I realized for the first time in my life, I'm going to go against my father's advice. And that was hard to do, but it was one of the best decisions I ever did, because that did move me. They paid for me to move down to Cape Town, and they have since also moved, and they've completely forgotten that they advised me to not do it. The second time was where much later I had both my kids, and I decided to resign from permanent employment and to start going into self-employment. And that one I didn't even ask them. I didn't get them to speak into it, because again, I knew that their value system that valued security and safety from an employment perspective would not help them to support me. And I knew that it was something that I needed to do. So I didn't ask them. I didn't even tell them. I had a 3 months notice period. I resigned, and a month to the day that I was going to leave, I was about to post it on social media. And I remembered, oh shit, I haven't told my parents. And so I quickly informed them then. And again, they were shocked, and they did say, well, if you asked us, we would have probably advised you differently, but see, the decision has been made and we'll pray for you. And they, again, today would agree that that's the second best decision I have taken. So therein is my lesson to go, my children are also likely to at some point exclude me from their decisions if I cannot play that role of being a soundboard and only giving advice when they ask it, and then also accepting they might not take my advice. If I'm not going to play that well, I'm going to be excluded. And that's a big wake-up call that I'm saying, and I'm hoping that it goes into my own heart. So I think in that process of taking our stories, and I trust you would have done the same. You would have now, or if you don't have time in the moment after the session, go and take some time and reflect on what are your own personal lessons that you've learned through being the child, and help us make sense of that in terms of what can we practically take from that to translate into how do we want to show up as parents for our young adults. Pippa and Jo, can you maybe help us into kind of translating some of these themes into practicalities?
Perfect. So I'll kick off with the first one. And I think the first one is really about encouraging and cultivating a sense of self-knowledge in our children. And so it's really important that our children understand their values, their motivations, and ultimately their why. And that is really important for this generation. So Gen Z, it's really important that they understand and they connect to their why. They have a deep desire to do that. And so as parents, we can play a really important role in helping them cultivate that and perhaps helping them uncover that. And so again, it's perhaps about asking questions, right, as they go through different situations and journeys throughout their career. And depending on, how proactive you are, maybe some of you have got children at school, you can start now already. But thinking about things like, what are you proud of? What kind of impact do you want to have in the world? Like, what lights you up? And even if it's a small thing, and what impact you hope that the work you will do will have on others. And so again, perhaps asking these types of questions, helping them identify patterns, identify themes that can contribute to their why, that they keep going on a journey of self-discovery by themselves too, but we can help with cultivating it through questions.
And then, there's a lot of aspects that's going to change from their first job through their career. The one is their values will be tested and reshaped, and it will also depend on the company that they start working for. And that is also one of the reasons why it could be that your child might only stay a year or two at a company. Their motivations will change as their responsibilities unfold and they grow. They maybe have a partner, they maybe get married, There's children, their motivations and motivators are going to definitely shift. The one other thing is decisions, and we would need to start trusting our children to make their own decisions, choose their own path, and that is how they also learn responsibility. The advice that I always give my son is be true to yourself, be true to your roots when you make a decision. It can be totally out of the box decision, but measure it to what is the values that you were taught in the house, what is the roots that you have, and measure it against that. And then trust your child to make that decisions. Trust them to even make the mistakes. They might even surprise you. You might think, oh, but they're not capable, and how are they going to do this? And they've never done this before. And I mean, Rentia, even in our previous exercise where we self-reflected, when I look back, I didn't even have the experience that my parents had at that point in time, but I still did it. I still made it. I had a job, I had a career, and so I moved between positions. So trust them. Like I said, they might even surprise you.
For me, I think this theme of managing uncertainty is a really big one. I mean, we spoke about how that's like the one thing that is just essential to everything at the moment. And I think really navigating uncertainty well is about embracing lifelong learning. And this doesn't mean necessarily more certificates and more qualifications, but it's really embracing and adopting a mindset of curiosity. We've spoken a lot about adaptability, and also a sense of openness to learn new things as the world continuously shifts. And so, yes, maybe that is taking a course or a short course. Maybe it's encouraging your children to, they're at work, like take on a new project, or they sometimes call them like stretch assignments, those types of things where they can learn, or getting a mentor, or having conversations with colleagues. And again, it's about perhaps encouraging conversations through asking questions like, what did you learn from that experience, or what are you taking from that experience, as opposed to thinking about like, is that the perfect role, is that exactly what I want. And I think for me, it's also important to say that, like, as much as you ask the questions, like, you practicing this in your own life is hugely important, right? Like normalizing, navigating uncertainty, trying those things yourself, and normalizing like growth and learning in your own language is really important. So, instead of saying, are you in the right job yet? Maybe something like that might come out, or you certainly might like think it. It's like, again, what are you learning from where you are right now? And just subtle shift makes such a big difference. Also in their confidence too, which is hugely important.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Pippa was saying, is they model what we do. And I sometimes joke when I get things wrong. I would say to my children, do what I say, don't do what I do, because I know that I mess this up. And how you adapt to change is how they will adapt to change. And if they see you are okay with the move that they made, if they see that you are encouraging them or guiding them, they will feel more comfortable, and their stress levels and anxiety will drop.
For me, another really important theme, and that I think is just, I mean, I've said this for many years, but I think it's becoming even more important now, is just that of resilience. And so, cultivating resilience in our homes and preparing our children to be resilient in today's day and age, for me, is an absolute like non-negotiable. And I think what's really important is that we actually also get clear on what resilience is versus isn't, right? Resilience isn't just like pushing through no matter what and like just simply like grinning and bearing it, but it is actually this ability to be able to acknowledge like what you're feeling, what is happening, and how it is impacting you, and ultimately developing healthy coping mechanisms, a sense of self-awareness, and of course, emotion regulation to be able to navigate through the situation, get through the hard time, to come out of it, and then to be able to say, wow, like I'm really proud of myself, I did that, and what am I taking away from that? And so again, like encouraging that, I mean, I can't say it enough, through the types of questions, through the language we use, and again, like practicing that ourselves, like showing our children what it means to be resilient, how we handle failures or challenges and setbacks. And so just really reframing that resilience is such an incredible skill set that we need to have and is so important in today's day and age. So practicing that and cultivating that in your home. There's one more, Rentia, but I'm cognizant that you were going to.
No. I wanted to, resilience came up for me. So that's what I wanted to say. And then you got that. So now please continue.
Perfect. So I think the one last thing from my side that I suppose was just sitting with me a lot in preparation for today is that I also want to acknowledge that like this phase is also really unique for you as parents, right? Like for the first time, your children are stepping into a stage of life that feels relatable to you or potentially relatable to you. You know, like, you know what it means to be in the workplace and face deadlines and like navigate office politics and difficult managers. Like you've been there, you know it, maybe you deal with it every day. But I think it's really important to remember that there's also a sense of tension here. Like while the stage of life might look really familiar, the world that they're entering into is not the same as the one that we entered. And I know we spoke about this at the beginning. And so just remembering that, I think, is really important. And so like our task as parents is to really walk that fine line, right? On the one hand, we can relate, we can perhaps empathize rather with the challenges, with the struggles, with maybe some of the things that they're going through, and can share our experiences. But at the same time, we've got to really, really, really make sure that we don't project or are tempted to project, you know, our solutions or our realities or what our definitions of right or wrong or success or unsuccessful is onto them. And so again, just like acknowledging that within ourselves as parents is really important. And when we can do that and we can straddle that tension, I think that's for me an important part of what it also means to have an adult to adult relationship. And also acknowledging that like you are still their parents too. And that they don't need you necessarily to map out the route anymore, right? But they need you to be able to stand beside them, to be steady, to be that perhaps that sense of groundedness that I know many of them really do long for, but also to be really encouraging and again, like available as they find their own way and as they navigate through all of this uncertainty and all the unknowns.
Thank you, Pippa. I think that's so true. And I think both of you have shared such lovely reminders and practical tips on how to really do this on a day-to-day basis, what to watch out for and what traps not to fall into, and most importantly, what does ideal parenting look like during this phase. As you've been talking and as I reflect on our past sessions, I know that there's been a bit of a framework that we've worked on or we've used to guide us in terms of the guidance, the support that we've been giving in these sessions to kind of help us navigate this parenthood journey. And we thought that we'll leave it until this final session to make it explicit. And I'm sure that after we've made it explicit, if you listen back, you would hear the evidence of that. And so this very simple model that we believe is a powerful model consists of 5 words. So the 5 words are listen, notice, encourage, connect, and empower. So if we just pause and go through them slowly, listen is for me is about being willing to hear their uncertainty without jumping in and fixing it. The next second one, notice, to pay attention to what's happening both in your child as well as in yourself. to notice our own reactions and our assumptions, and then to encourage, to remind them of their strength and the values that they hold and the value that they have when they doubting themselves. Then to connect, to help them see the links between who they are and the opportunities around them. And then lastly, to empower, to step back and to let them own their decisions, even if it means learning through mistakes. So to anchor this, we thought that we'll leave you with 3 reflective questions, one from each of us, that we invite you to take note of in order to either kind of use it now or later on when you are in a situation where you have to specifically ask yourself, how do I want to show up in this phase? So my question that I'm leaving with you is, what value do I most want my young adults to carry with them into their working life? Jo, what is your question that you want to gift?
So the gift that I've got, and the question is, what opportunities might my child have in their lifetime that didn't exist in mine? And how can I help them stay open and curious enough to embrace those?
And from me, how can I model agility in my own life?
Almost feels like wanting to pause and just go, let's take that in, but I invite you to, when you look that back, to do that. Take some time to pause with these questions. And again, if you want to share some of what came up for you, please document that somewhere. And then as we close the session, because I am aware of the time and we've got officially 6 minutes left, there's one more exercise that we want you to do. Over the past few months, we've traveled quite a distance from the first discussions around the first steps of making career decisions to where we are now, or making subject choice decisions to where we are now, preparing to enter the working world. We want to invite you to do an exercise which might feel a little bit awkward, but that we know have amazing, amazing power to help you stay the course. And that would be to take out some time, take a 1-page fresh piece of paper and write a letter to your child. Practically, that looks like, keeping it short, just a few lines, capturing the hopes and the dreams and the wishes that you hold for them as they step into the world of work, and also the role that you want to play in their journey. The letter is yours to keep. If you want to share it with them, absolutely fine. If you just want to keep it for yourself to remind you of how you want to show up in those moments, that too is fine. Either way, it is about a way of grounding yourself in what matters most and of reminding yourself of how you want to show up for them in this season. Before I close with the final word, I'd like to give Pippa and Jo a chance to leave you with one last thought each.
So just before I go into the last thought, just thank you from my side to be part of this journey that we walked, and that we were able to give back to parents and just give them that encouragement of, it's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. So my last thought is, the world will bring opportunities we never had. Our gift is to encourage curiosity so they're ready to step through with confidence.
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, I also want to say thank you, because I think it's been a lovely journey for us to reflect on all of these different stages and sometimes put ourselves in different shoes that we might not always give ourselves the times and space to do. And so I hope that our reflections have given you lots of food for thought. And for me, I want to just leave you all with, and perhaps just remind you that, like, really our most powerful lesson that we can leave is our example, right? Is how we show up, and when we keep learning and adapting, we show our children how to embrace change. And I don't say that from the perspective of feeling the pressure, but more from a place of empowerment to know that as we continue to do it ourselves as parents, we have a role to play in supporting our children and encouraging them to do it in themselves too. Oh.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you everyone for joining us. Not only today, but throughout this Parent Empowerment series. I appreciate Pippa and Jo for consistently showing up and sharing so abundantly from your place of wisdom. And I trust that everyone have taken something from the session today that will serve them and their families on the journey ahead. And I think, yeah, as a last thought from me is just, we cannot promise our children certainty, but we can walk with them, equipping them with presence, confidence, and integrity to navigate their journeys all the way through the mountaintops and the valleys. Thank you and have a blessed day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.